We're getting down to our last few books. This is Moosetache. You remember Moosetache? Remember he took his mustache and he made it into a Christmas tree. They didn't have a Christmas tree. This is the same guy, Moosetache. Moose had a problem, a horrible, hairy, prickly problem. It grew right below his nostrils and just above his upper lip. A moustache. That's a big mustache. Now, not a few spare hairs or a shy little stubble. No mere weak wandering whiskers on the upper lip of this moose, no siree. Moose had a big, bushy, bristly, mighty moustache, but a moustache that was a burly, surly, mangy mess, and it itched a lot. Sure he plucked, and he tweezed. He even clipped, snipped, and teased, but his combs were still cowards, and his brushes rebelled. His scissors simply surrendered. Look at him. Oh my. The scissors have a white flag. Moose was in a frizzy tizzy. The moustache was completely crimping his style. He was a great hoofer, but he could barely bop and hip-hop with a moustache going flip-flop. He was a wonderful chef, but he simply could not flambe his souffle with all of his whiskers in his way. And he was a daring skier, but how could he downhill race with the mighty moustache blowing in his face? Moose had to do something, and soon. But what? After days and days of much serious thought, Moose had an idea. He crossed some hair here and he crossed some hair there. He tied his moustache around his neck. A moose scarf seemed to be the ideal answer to his problem. It was so easy, so simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect. But then his moustache got knotted and mangled and horribly tangled, and those hundreds of hairs still prickled and tickled. Worse, Moose could barely take a breath with all that moustache wrapped around his neck. So Moose untied, unwrapped, unknotted, and gulped in some fresh air. He got another idea. He parted some hair this way, he parted some hair that way, and he heaped all that moustache on top of his head. Moustachioed antlers seemed to be the ideal answer to his problem. It was so simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect, until a squadron of squirrels and one very nosy gopher moved right into them, the Moose Motel. They huddled and hoarded, furrowed in, burrowed out. Needless to say, it became quite crowded up there on Moose's head, and heavy and messy. Look at all those animals living in his moustache. And look at the welcome. Look, that one's grilling. Silly. And very, very noisy. The squirreling, shitting, and chatting squeals and squawks woke Moose every morning before the crack of dawn, and the gopher was giving the moose one hairy headache. Moose needed his sleep. Moose needed his rest. Moose needed his privacy. Moustachioed antlers? Nuts, said the moose. So he unparted and unpiled, untwisted and twined, and said adios to the hairy horns. But now what? What? The miserable moose took a hold of a hunk of hair and he wrestled it, then roped it. He tethered it, tied it, tamed it. Aha! A moose tail. Now that was simple. That was easy. That was not so perfectly perfect. Look at that. Talk about a dizzy do. Moose didn't know if he was coming or going. Backward, forward, this way, that. He didn't know which end was which. Moose had to bail on that tail. And so he thought and thought and thought some more, but no other idea was a worthy winner. Braids were a bother, a moustache sweater too sweltering. Net, not. Poor Moose. His problem was truly terrible, unbearable, just downright sad. He felt so lonely he didn't know what else to do. Then, call it fate, call it destiny. It was probably dumb luck. But one day Moose tripped on his moustache and had no time to duck. Oomph! Pardon me, they both said as they bumped. Then they blinked, and they stared, and their hearts went thump-a-thump. She was a moose, with the bouffant so bodacious, outrageous. Well, it was just plain old big, hair after hair piled higher than high, a skyscraping dew of glorious curls, a tower of swirling twists and twirls. She was simply splendid, stupendous, absolutely superb. Oh, he's in love. Of course, Moose had to ask how she did what she did to get such a do. Mrs. Moose winked, and then she whispered, just a little glue. So she helped he fearlessly plunge a hoof into a fat pot of the white, gooey goop. And carefully, oh so carefully, they glopped and they plopped, they pasted and they pressed, they coaxed and they curled every truly unruly wayward whisker. Around and around they tweaked and twirled those horrible hairs, until Moose's once mangy mess was now a wondrous, winding wave of marvelous Moosetache. Moose gazed in the mirror and smiled a broad, moosey smile. He was so happy, so glad, just giddy with glee. He looked dashing and handsome. Moose gushed, "Is that really me?" Oh, my. With not a care for one hair, the moose pair boogied and bopped. Look at his mustache now. They skied downhill, even uphill, and their cooking was hot, hot, hot. So, of course, it wasn't long after that Moose and his Moosetache and his beautiful bride foxtrotted and tangoed and waltzed down the aisle. Good hair days, bad hair days, they vowed to love and to cherish, and with hearts heaped with love, and pots filled with goop, they both sighed "I do" glue and promised never to part. It was so simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect, and it stuck. And look, there are their kids. The end. Have a wonderful day.